It's a known fact that fasting makes you grow wings and grow really long incisors and run a 7-second 100-meter dash, right? Okay. Now we know that's not true, but fasting has some pretty powerful benefits outside of just the whole body composition thing. There's some really big physiological pieces, but there's also some really big mental, emotional pieces too. So let's have some fun with this. Maybe you can share this with some friends and family that aren't so sold on the whole fasting idea, or you just want a little bit of brain candy today and just enjoy some fun, lighthearted, awesome content. Make sure you do hit that red subscribe button. Make sure you hit that little bell icon to turn on notifications so you never ever miss a daily beat. And if you are into fasting, check out Zero Fasting down below. It's an app. So it's a fasting timer, totally free app. It's just cool. It just allows you to keep track of your fast. There's a community so you can fast with other people. There's also a paid version, which is really cool. If you do want to use it, there's a special discount code down below in the description. They're a big supporter of this channel, but by all means, the free version is awesome too. It just allows you to keep track of everything and stay motivated. All right, let's talk about fasting. Number one is meal prep. Come on, we know that meal prep is not fun. Intermittent fasting makes it so you don't have to meal prep as much, okay? If you're fasting, you're maybe prepping 2 meals. You're not prepping 5, 6, 7, okay? Plain and simple, that is number one. Number two, we get a little bit more scientific. Muscle protein breakdown. Sounds like a bad thing, but muscle protein breakdown is where your body is breaking down protein from areas that it doesn't need it to give to an area that does need it. I reference it like the Robin Hood within your body. It borrows from an area that maybe doesn't need it so much and gives it to an area that's in demand. Muscle protein breakdown and reallocation. Number three is the migrating motor complex. Sounds like a compound or some kind of giant RV group, but what it is your gut actually increasing motility. So the migrating motor complex is like the janitorial crew within your gut, and it can't come in and do its job until food is out of the equation. So the rumblies in your tummy, that is the migrating motor complex to some degree. Once food is out of the system because you're fasting, then all of a sudden that migrating motor complex cleans up a lot of the crud that's hanging out in your gut. But it can't do that if you're consistently eating. Your office cannot get clean if the employees are still there all the time. The janitor needs to come in at night after they leave. Happening in your gut too. Number four, travel. Look at, I don't come across sweet potato vending machines or coconut oil vending machines or snow cones made from cauliflower rice when I'm in an airport. Okay, so if I'm fasting, it's a heck of a lot easier to travel. I get on a plane and heaven forbid I don't get to have a honey roasted peanut. Okay, it's not that hard. You fast throughout the travel day and there you go. Then you land. By the time you land, it's time to break your fast and you're on your merry way with travel. It makes travel a total cinch. You leave the guesswork out of the equation. Number five, allergies. Believe it or not, fasting has an effect on the histamine response. It doesn't mean that it's going to completely eradicate allergies, but there's some science that shows that during a fast, you have less of a histamine reaction. So hay fever coming around, maybe you're living in Texas and all that cedar is driving you crazy. Well, try out fasting. You might be pleasantly surprised. It's what I did. Honestly, works pretty darn well. Number six is BDNF. Fancy way of saying improves the function of your brain. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor. In between the neural synapse here, you have the ability to grow new neural intersections. A two-way street turns into a three-way, to a four-way, to a five-way, and it needs BDNF to grow those new pathways. Fasting increases the expression of BDNF, meaning it allows the body to produce more of that. So I don't want to go out on a limb and say this too much because it's kind of claimy to say it, but fasting kind of gives you the goods to potentially let yourself get smarter. Let's just leave it at that. Number seven is actually probably one of my favorite ones, and that's the element of mastery. With fasting, you learn self-control, you learn mastery, and you learn things about yourself. In a world where we just cannot control all the wildly unexpected things that are coming at us, it's kind of nice to be able to know that we can at least control what we're putting in our mouth or not. And there's a good sense of fulfillment and sort of satisfaction that comes from that. Okay, now along with that, we also develop a good sense of understanding delayed gratification. We live in a world where everything is at our fingertips right now. We get what we want right when we want it. We're all entitled whether we want to admit it or not. And it's nice to be able to just know that you still have it in you to save your pennies over the course of the week to go buy an Allen wrench at Kragen with your allowance. Sorry, that's a literal reference to my childhood. Number 8 is going to be the clowns and leprechauns are kind of nice when you're hallucinating, when you're going into a deep fast. Okay, that one's just to make sure you're listening. Number 9, it's easy not to snack. when you're making meals for your kids. Now, I did a separate video talking about fasting for parents in general, but when you are making a peanut butter sandwich, tell me you do not have some part of you that wants to lick the spoon, right? When you're fasting, it becomes a lot easier to not lick the spoon because it's very black and white. You're fasting, don't lick the spoon. In fact, I should get a shirt that says don't lick the spoon. Now we're gonna get weird again. Number 10, sciencey, histone deacetylase inhibition. Okay, this means that when you're fasting, you have the ability to access your genetic library much better. During a fast, you have an increase in what are called ketones. These ketones are, fancy words, a histone deacetylase inhibitor, meaning they take away the guard that blocks the door of the library. So you take out the guard, you unlock the door, you can get into the genetic library, meaning you can now access and rebuild cells the way that you are genetically supposed to, not the way that you have been dictated to by your lifestyle previously. It is in effect like a big old reset button on your life. Number 11, time. We don't have a lot of time. Everything is moving at warp speed. It's a lot easier to not eat than it is to try to think about eating healthy. It's a lot easier to not eat than it is to eat unhealthy. It still takes less time to not eat than it does to rip on through the Taco Bell or Jack in the Box drive-thru. I don't care how convenient it is, nothing is more convenient than not stuffing your face, right? Period. Number 12 is a little bit more diet flexibility. Yes, I do know that with great power comes great responsibility. At the end of a fast, you should be eating clean. You should try to capitalize on absorbing clean food. I get that and I preach that. But there's also a nice little area where you have some flexibility. Since fasting is time-restricted eating, you have a period of time in which you're not eating, it gives you the ability to just relax a little bit and maybe have a cheeseburger with your kids now and then so they don't think that you're a complete whack job. It's just kind of nice to be able to feel like a human. Coming from someone that had tried all kinds of diets and had been slaving away to 6-7 meals per day before, trust me, it's a nice breath of fresh air to a couple times per week feel like I can eat like a normal human. And still, well, I hate to bring it back to fat loss because this video is supposed to not be about fat loss, but yeah. Number 13, focus and attention. From an evolutionary side of this, it's pretty intriguing. Our brain is our big survival tool, not our brawn. We're not that cool. We don't have big crazy brawn. We don't have big crazy teeth. We can't just fight with our fists and our teeth and survive as much as we think that we can. We use our brains. Okay, so that means if we're fasting, our body redirects energy to the brain, which means that if you're someone that's working a Silicon Valley entrepreneur tech job, that's probably why you're interested in fasting so much, because you do get a big brain benefit. So if you haven't tried fasting for the reason of focus, you may want to pay a little attention to it because it's pretty tried and true and pretty heavily researched too. Number 14, if you do a long enough fast and you produce enough ketones, you have an increase in stem cell production, specifically within the gut, which implies that there could be some more stem cell activity occurring in other areas that we haven't researched yet. But new stem cells in the gut are a pretty darn good start. Restoration of the gut is definitely something that I want to have happen. I mean, period. Stem cells are awesome. They grow new cells. So if ketones can help do that, then heck, I am on board. Number 15, you can get by with less caffeine and have less of a caffeine crash. Now let me give you a little science as to why. You already have epinephrine and norepinephrine flowing when you're on a fast. A little bit of caffeine sometimes just pushes you over that edge a little bit, and you might find you only need a half a cup of coffee to get where you want to be. Now, you don't generally crash as hard because you have less in the way of overall glycogen stored in your muscles that's going to get dumped out. A lot of times what happens is you end up with a big spike in blood glucose because you had caffeine, and then eventually that glucose drops and you crash. Well, the reason your blood glucose spikes is because you take in glycogen from your muscles and it goes into your bloodstream alongside caffeine. Complicated biochemistry, but simply put, you don't need as much caffeine and you're not going to have as much of a blood sugar crash afterwards, even if it's a small one that you don't normally recognize. Number 16, it's good for the business person. Okay, you need to go into a meeting. You cannot deal with blood sugar fluctuations. You want constant levels. You want to be able to know what's going on. Business dinners, business lunches, believe it or not, take it from someone who's been there, it's easier and more widely accepted to sit down and say, I'm just going to have some water or club soda today or some iced tea, than it is to try to finagle the waiter into making you some kind of salad with tuna and olive oil and maybe a side of salmon and a little bit of black pepper, but not too much black pepper, and maybe a little bit of turmeric. Okay, you look like less of a weirdo if you just say, I'm really not that hungry, I'm just going to have some water. Believe me. Number 17, the gut microbiome. When you fast, you actually lose the number of gut bacteria that you have, but you have an increase in species diversity, which means when you do eat, you have more species that are growing and expanding, giving you a more diverse, more robust gut bacteria, which has been linked to so many different things, and quite frankly is probably the future of science and the human body as we know it. But the point is, you're resetting your gut biome a bit, giving yourself a fighting chance to rebuild the way that you really want to be. Number 18, a cleaner feeling workout. You don't have another fuel in your way. You don't have food in your stomach. You don't have food in your intestinal tract breaking down, taking away from the peripheral blood flow that you need and the tissue perfusion of the blood that you need to get a good workout. The energy is there in your body and you're pulling directly from it, and you're sending the proper signals to your body that is allowing not only your brain to get better, but your body to become more resilient and more effective. So yes, improvements in performance, improvements in strength are not uncommon. Even if you feel weaker during a fast, you train yourself to be adapted to training fasted. When you do train in a fed state, you're like Superman. Okay, and number 19, the last one, it's a pretty cheap diet to do. You don't have an excuse of saying, hey, that's too expensive, Whole30's expensive, Paleo's expensive, Keto's expensive. Fasting is only going to save you money. Now, I'm sure you could get as granular as you want and say that Thomas says to eat this and that, and if I do it Thomas's way, it's going to be expensive, and yeah, it might be if you follow every single video that I talk about, but the reality is you're skipping a couple meals. Dollars and cents, you save some money. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. See you tomorrow.